Hello, everybody. Gosh, I'm trying to get my hair so it's not a complete mess. Okay, I hope you are all doing well today. Today, we are going to be talking about sleep. So sleep is something that is quite elusive nowadays in our Western world. And like it's estimated almost 75% of people at any given day have trouble with sleep. And I'm sure we have all been there, done that, and know how it can affect our well-being, how it can affect our functioning, how can it affect really our health and all of the things in between. So today I want to talk a little bit about sleep, the importance of it, how it evolved, why it evolved, and then how we can really optimize it beyond the obvious sort of things that we've talked about and how to actually bring those into practice. So if you have any questions at any time, feel free to drop them in the chat. Hopefully you can all see my screen now. Oops. Okay. Can someone just give me a thumbs up if you are good, if you can see the screen, if you can see the notes or just the PowerPoint? Or type in the chat or, okay, great, thank you. Okay. All right, so sleep. Why did it evolve? What's the point of it? So it's pretty straightforward. It's actually a little bit more interesting. So it evolved partly because as we were, organisms growing up in our evolutionary tree on Earth, we were navigating the duality of day and night. So day and night has existed for all of life, all the time. It's basically like a fundamental part of living on our world as we fluctuate between day and night. Obviously not if you're living in caves or under the ocean, but we're not talking about that right now. But as humans, we evolved living with daytime and nighttime. And so when we were sort of becoming who and what we are, our biology or whoever was creating us, natural selection, figured that it would be too much effort. It would expend too much effort to create two sets of whatever we would need to survive both in day and nighttime. So for example, like eyesight. Eyesight is great for day, for humans, it's not so great at night. Temperature regulation would need to change. And just things like that. So for our bodies evolutionarily, it would be really expensive to have all of those things evolved codependently. Being active in the day for most creatures on Earth makes more sense because we can harness and utilize the light of the sun, the heat, the daytime. Plants are more abundant, less predator or more predators, but depending on what it is. So what we're doing is we're using the energy that is happening during the day. It makes more sense for us to be active during the day because we use less energy. So now it didn't really evolve as a thing of how do we conserve energy to amplify our daytime effects. It more evolved of like, we don't have enough energy to make two sets of things. Now we are going to create one set of things that optimizes during the day. What do we do with all this time that we now have at night? And the obvious answer is to do something that is not going to require us to output a lot of physical effort. We want to be more dormant. We want to rest. We want to conserve energy. So when the daytime rolls around, we can do all of those things that we are needing to do to live, to survive. So sleep. Sleep evolved as a way to kill time during the night, and then it kind of went from there. So it's a process that conserves energy, keeps us slow, keeps us immobile, it keeps us quiet. We're not moving around, we're not doing too much. But it doesn't really make too much sense now in our modern day to have us do all of this and have our brains also turn off, right? Because while we're doing physical things during the day, at night, we're resting our physical body, we're conserving energy, but our brain doesn't necessarily need to go that dormant. So our brain has developed its own set, its nervous system, our immune system, our internal functionings have developed their own processes to take advantage of this physically dormant time. So and we will go through some of those functions. We'll learn some of what the body's actually doing in our sleep, but that's essentially how it evolved. So we wanted to conserve energy, we wanted to kill time during the day, and now it's evolved since then. So sleep has been around, non-REM sleep, so that's the slow wave sleep, has been around way before humans and consciousness evolved. But humans are actually the only mammals on Earth that delay sleep. So this shows us, this suggests that it's a newly evolved mechanism, sort of evolving with our consciousness, with the cognitive side of the brain, with conscious choice, and also with technology that we've evolved to keep us up and allow us to work and do more things late into the night. But we are consciously choosing not to go to bed or rise with the sleep and with the sun and the moon and the celestial body. So this is really the first time in our known history that we've been doing that. So our biology sometimes has a little bit of trouble catching up and calibrating, because traditionally we've entrained to the sun and the moon and the stars and the light cycles to calibrate our sleep. And that's kind of out the window now, which is why we hear the importance of, don't go on your phone before bed, block the blue lights, which we'll get into a little bit more. But that's why. So we're the only animals that delay sleep, our physiology, So in brief, sleep is a complex neurochemical process that improves and works our brains in various ways. It sort of restocks the armor of our immune system. It helps fight cancer. It prevents infection. It supports our immune system. It helps our mental, emotional, and post-traumatic stress stuff. And it does all of that while we're sleeping and dormant. And it's really quite fascinating. The toxic system, so the detox pathways, are also quite high or active during sleep. So it's said that our extracellular membrane will become more acidic. So that means essentially that it's suggesting sleep become more acidic as our body and our lymphatics work to clear stuff. And all of this, like in our dreams are also important, which I'll go into. And like in short, really, sleep is vital. It's vital to our functioning as humans. Every other animal sleeps. I imagine if you went to other planets and like aliens, they would probably sleep. There would probably be some sort of functioning of a binaural clock. So one period of rest, one period of more active. Okay, so here are some of the functions that I already went through. Okay, so let's talk about the types of sleep and what's actually going on in them. And then we can start to understand how we're evolving in our sleep and what might be going on, where stages we're lacking a little bit of. So there's REM sleep and there's non-REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement. So that's, you've probably heard of before. When we go into one stage of sleep called REM sleep, when we're dreaming, our eyes are actually doing this. They're moving from one side to the other like windshield wipers. And there's a number of reasons why they think our brains evolved to do that. It's really quite cool. So REM sleep is newer in the evolutionary tree than the non-REM sleep, so suggestive of cognition of humans of more recent involvement. REM sleep is this stage of sleep that we're dreaming in, and it's thought to be really important in emotional regulation. So when we're in REM sleep, our brains are reflecting on what's happening, it's looking forward to what's possible, and it's going through memories and calibrating them to our emotions to make sure that we're not, if we're having any traumatic responses, what exactly is considered trauma in the nervous system, and it will integrate all of this into the actual body. So this is what we're doing in REM sleep. Again, the newer portion of sleep in our evolutionary tree. So like I was saying, your eyes are doing a lot of this when we're in REM sleep. So as we go through the cycles of sleep, we move from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. These are all those non-REM stages of sleep. And then we'll move into REM sleep for a little bit. So about 2 to 3 cycles per night, we'll go into these rapid eye movement sleep. And this is when our eyes are doing this. And this they've studied is to actually, the physiology behind it is quite fascinating. And if you've ever heard of something, or if you've ever worked with some counselors now, they'll do something called EMDR, which stands for eye rapid movement desensitization. So what it is you're thinking of a traumatic process while you're moving your eyes back and forth in a counseling session. And this is actually thought to kind of replicate a waking version of REM sleep, because that is what's naturally happening when you're in REM sleep. You're processing emotion, you're thinking of memories, and you're calibrating them together. So utilizing that physiological process during the day in a safe setting to move through trauma has been shown to be super, super effective. And it's really interesting. So for yourselves, this is actually something that we can do. So if you're feeling really stressed out or agitated, or triggered by something, literally just sit down, do some of the grounding exercises, do some deep breathing, and move your eyes back and forth. It can be slow. You can maybe bring your finger in front and just sort of think on those and feel those things in your body. So all of the things we've been working on while you move your eyes back and forth. This can be an interesting way to notice how we're emotionally regulating and see if it can deprogram that traumatic response. So REM sleep is really fascinating. Sleep in general is really fascinating. All of these are different states of consciousness we move into, and we're dependent on them. So REM sleep, we're starting to research, we're starting to know how important it is. We're starting to be able to understand how we can use it in our normal day-to-day. Non-REM sleep, so this is the rest of the chunk of sleep. So an older phylogeny, it evolved way older than humans and REM sleep. This is kind of the classic sleep. This is when our body is resting, it's recalibrating, and it's moving into like different states of clearing out junk in the brain, essentially. So stage 1 is just the transition between waking and falling asleep. We can probably all remember or know what that feels like. It's that like dreamlike, we're sort of still conscious, sort of not conscious state. There's some really interesting things that you can consciously tune into and channel if you're in this state, because your brain is in what's called theta waves. I'll go into a little bit more about the brain stages or the brain waves here, but theta wave is essentially correlated with a more creative, the flow state. When you get those ideas, when you get that channeling, the intuition, whatever kind of way you want to think about it, that theta wave state is what's going on. So that can happen right around when you're about to fall asleep. Really good time to journal, to meditate, to reflect. Stage 2 is when your body is in deep relaxation. So we're starting to just get a little bit of deeper. We get what's called sleep spindles, where our brains start to move into that deeper state and our brain waves start changing. Stage 3 is deep wave, slow wave sleep. So this is where most of the healing is happening. It's our deepest form of non-REM sleep. It's sort of the part that makes us feel rested. Is if we don't get enough deep, slow wave sleep, we'll wake up feeling irritable, we'll wake up feeling unrested, whatever. So during deep, slow wave sleep also, this is where your body is kind of practicing things. So it's practicing the things that we learn during the day, like the skills. So playing a piano, doing calculus, cooking, whatever it is, our brains are going through and sort of running through these processes as we sleep. So some of the old ideas of like, before we go to bed, think of the things you want to do or the things you want to get good at. Your brain will likely practice it and potentially help those neurochemical pathways in your nervous system kind of get aligned so it can actually execute that skill. It's a really cool process. So sleep isn't just for resting, it's actually about preparing our nervous system and our body and our trauma and our emotions, and getting everything in alignment so we can function during the day. Our well-being is dependent on these states of consciousness. So that's essentially what sleep is. It's a different state of consciousness, which is really interesting when you think about dreams and then mental disorders like schizophrenia, or even different hallucinogens or drugs or different substances that change our state of consciousness. Sleeping and dreaming is really no different than, I mean, it is different as in it's a different state of consciousness, but like if we're taking a drug, if we're drinking alcohol, if we're schizophrenic, if we're dreaming, these are all separate bubbles of consciousness that are different from the one that we exist in on the day-to-day when we're sober, when we're thinking, when we're interacting. So if you really think about it, I find this really fascinating. Like taking someone who tends towards schizophrenia, for example, they tend to hear sounds that aren't there. They see things that they're not there. They're envisioning scenarios that aren't happening. They're off in other worlds, or maybe they're in our own world. They're just experiencing sort of a different type of reality. And the difference with sleep or dreaming or REM sleep is that we're paralyzed when this is happening. But really, when we're dreaming, we can really kind of tap into that same sort of consciousness. We may be hearing things, we may be seeing things, we may be imagining things that aren't really real. And again, with the psychotic drugs like psilocybin and marijuana and LSD and anything that alters our consciousness, is we're tapping into things that we don't normally see on this plane of reality. And a lot of cultures, almost every traditional culture, recognizes the dream state of consciousness as just as an important one of spiritual growth as the non-dream state. And they will actually equate, what is it, the word I'm trying to say? They'll try to make it similar to like the states of consciousness that they use with plant medicines. So honoring both of those sort of things, we can recognize that perhaps sleep is also a tool for us to grow in the spiritual realm. Shamanic culture tells us this. A lot of cultures tells us this. Our Western culture ignores this. So this is a really important to thinking and how we're thinking and how our nervous system is acting. So that's just something to ponder, the dream state. I always tell people to take note of their dreams, to write them down, especially if there's certain themes coming up a lot of the time, whether those be physical themes, if you're seeing the same people, if you're, if you're the type of person that goes off to space in their dreams, or if you're the type of person that stays in the reality and like goes to the mall or does whatever you're normally doing when you're sleeping or when you're awake. Pay attention, because this can be a clue, and this can be really interesting as to how your consciousness is functioning and also how your dreams change. So I'm curious actually if anybody has noticed a change in dreams as we've started to sort of reprogram things and have more gratitude and notice some of our trauma patterns. Our dreams can change. Okay, so the rhythm of sleep, so circadian rhythms, and now I'm going to chat a little bit about the timing of the day, how we're entrained to the light, and how we can kind of hack this and utilize this in our world now. So in our brains, the part of the brain that keeps track of the light and is really sensitive to the light, it's called the suprachiasmatic nuclei, and it actually lives very close to the surface of our skulls, so it can be sensitive to light. It can input, it can actually tell how we are in the day without input from our eyes, which is really fascinating. There's even some research that suggests that behind our knees, in the back of our knees, there's some nerves there that can be sensitive to light, so that they can see the light and then train our bodies to these sleep-wake cycles without us actually needing to see with our eyes. Again, it just goes to show how much more we still have to learn and why this would persist, and the evolution and what sort of things we can use to optimize our bodies. So we evolved as humans around campfire light. So at nighttime when it went dark, we didn't have artificial lights, we didn't have lamps, we didn't have blue lights, we didn't have LEDs, we had campfires. And so our eyes evolved to be able to tolerate red light without activating the rods in our eyes. So those are like the things that are sensitive to light, which is why like red lights or night lights are always red, is because red activates the cones in our eyes, doesn't really turn our brain on and tell that it's time to wake up. So this is because of the light of the campfire that we evolved growing up. So candlelight, campfire light, anything soft and more focused on red light at night is great. The issue in our modern world now is the blue light and the artificial light. So again, like I was saying, never before in our history as humans have we had exposure to light after the sun goes down. Now we do. And these lights, like the lights we have in our homes, are meant to emulate blue light, so daylight, which blue light just means it's on a different wavelength. It's a little bit higher on the spectrum of light. It means it activates our brains in different ways. So it tells our brains that it's awake, it's time to get up, it's time to do things. It stops the production of melatonin, which puts us to sleep, and it gets us energized. As the sun goes down and we're exposed to more red light at night, campfire, candles, whatever, our bodies naturally would increase the production of melatonin. Our core body temperature would drop, we would get tired, everything would get more quiet at night, and we would go to sleep. So these processes are all being disrupted now. The blue lights are staring at our screen, staring at our phone, staring at our TV, just having LED lights now everywhere. Yes, they're more energy efficient, but there is a trade-off on our biology. And another thing that people don't mention as often is the issue of temperature. So our core body temperature is supposed to drop 2 to 3 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit, sorry, for us to, again, trigger that melatonin response, which a lot of us now, we don't live in environments where the temperature, well, we do, we live in environments where the temperature naturally drops at night, but we're living inside. So we're not getting that natural drop or sensitivity to the outside air or light. So how's our body supposed to know that it's time to get tired? It's time to be asleep, aside from what we tell ourselves in our brains. It's 11 o'clock, it's time to go to bed. And even if we do get tired, a lot of the time in our modern world, sometimes we'll use things like sedatives or a glass of wine or whatever it may be to make us tired, nervous system depressant. And this can definitely put us to sleep. It's not the natural sleep. So our brain waves aren't in training properly. The hormones that are supposed to be released for sleep naturally aren't always. And things there, it's happening, but it's more of a band-aid, and it's not the natural, they're not the natural process. Really, none of us are living in the traditional way our genes evolved to experience sleep right now. One of the most interesting and effective things that I have actually found and that I think is great for sleep is binaural beats, which is really fascinating. So binaural actually means using both ears. And if you'll recall, I was talking about the different stages of sleep before. So stage 1, 2, 3. Stage 3 is slow wave sleep. It's the most like nourishing, clearing, healing kind of sleep. And then stage 1 sleep is the stage that we induce right before we're about to fall asleep. So listening to binaural beats or different sets of frequencies, as we start to learn to understand that the brain runs on frequencies, electrical frequencies, and that these frequencies correlate with different stages of consciousness, we can start to use like things like sound and light and vibration to change the state of consciousness via our brain waves, which I think is so fascinating. This is sort of where quantum physics comes in and all that stuff. And this is the bridging the gap between the science and the spiritual. But how, a little bit of the science behind binaural beats and how they work. So our brains, for example, we're trying to fall asleep. Stage 1, as you can see here, is correlated with frequencies, brainwave frequencies of 8 to 13 hertz. So the idea is if we put a tone or headphones of a sound between 8 to 13 hertz in our brains, we should be able to influence the brain to entrain to that tone and essentially induce it into a stage 1 sleep pattern, right? And that is the idea. But the problem is our ears do not pick up sounds that low, not even close. So how do we get this frequency to the brain? Different ways of working with it, but binaural beats was a really, really amazing discovery, interesting discovery to figure out how to let the brain hear this frequency. So it figured out if you put one frequency in one ear and a slightly different one in the other ear, what will happen is the brain will minus the difference and create a third frequency that it thinks it hears from the difference, if that makes sense at all. So for example, if you put like a 50 hertz sound in your right ear, and oh my God, my math is going to be really bad here, a 42 hertz sound in your left ear. So slightly different. You probably won't be able to pick up the difference, maybe ever so slightly. 50 in one ear, 42 in one ear. Our brains will minus the difference, which is 8 hertz, and then you'll actually hear an 8 hertz frequency in your brain. You're not actually hearing it. Your brain is creating it from the difference in your ears. Super fascinating. So this is how we entrain or get those frequencies to the brain for binaural beats. So that's why they may all sound a little bit different. It doesn't matter what frequencies you use. Your brain will just somehow minus the difference and hear that third frequency beat. So a lot of the time you're trying to get like the meditation binaural beats that you might download are trying to entrain your brain into theta wave state, which is what I was talking about before, is the state that's associated with creativity, with flow state, with work, with energy, theta wave. And so we'll use all of those frequencies in the same principle to hear our brain's a frequency between 4 and 7 hertz. So honestly, for me, like chemical sleep aids, even herbs, things like that, affecting the physical body and the way that our hormones are being produced, the way our body's entraining to light, depressing the nervous system, those don't work as well for me. Neural beats, because I'm trying to optimize the way that my brain is already functioning and entrain its already functioning brain waves into an alpha state or theta state or that sleep state, which will then signal to my body that it's time to sleep. And it can naturally go on the process of producing melatonin, of dropping the core body temperature, of all of those things that naturally occur when you sleep. So I find this way more effective personally. It does take some training, I would say, for your brain to sort of learn how it's functioning, learn what's going on. But once you do it, it's quite potent. So if you do have trouble sleeping, this is something I would suggest at least trying. So insomnia, like I was saying, up to 75% of people in any given night can have difficulties with sleep. That's a lot of people. Most of us average around 7 or 8 hours. I know some people, they say they can function on 5 or 6 hours. I used to be one of those people, and then I read countless studies that say that's not actually true. Almost every human needs 7 to 8 hours of sleep to function properly, and your body will get that over average. Like it will make sure it sleeps. Bad things happen if we deprive people of sleep. We're not even allowed to do those experiments anymore because they are very unethical. So here are just, some of the things that show up with chronic sleep loss. Tons of studies on increased blood pressure, heart issues, hypertension, heart attacks, strokes, obesity, diabetes, and then of course it's our mental state that comes also: depression, anxiety, brain function, memory loss. This is a huge one, as we learned that the brain and sleep is really functioning when we're trying to consolidate memories. Immune system deficiencies have been shown to be really big here. So again, this could go back to our white blood cell count, our detox pathways running at nighttime, our immune system fortifying itself, sweeping out old debris from the lymphatics. All of this is happening at night. Fertility is actually another huge one that they're starting to study, is sleep loss or chronic sleep loss. This may not even be obvious, but will affect the way your estrogen, your progesterone for men and women cycle, especially for us women, and then can lead to things like menstrual disorders, decreased fertility, anything like that that can go on with the hormones and adrenals and stress. So, as we've seen, the sleep cycle is super important in our physical health. If we think back to what we were talking about, how it could be important in our emotional and spiritual growth, sleep loss is less of the time for us to explore that other realm, for us to function, for us to emotionally regulate, for us to go into that REM state and literally sweep the stuff out of our brains. We need sleep. And so, like I was saying, it might not always be obvious that you're missing out on sleep. You might not always feel tired. We're very good nowadays at functioning on little sleep. We even pride ourselves on it sometimes, as just in our modern society. I still got 3 hours of sleep and I'm still functioning and doing all of this stuff, and I'm so tired. We tell ourselves, I think that's one of the biggest complaints I hear from everybody, and including myself, I'm tired. And so this just shows how prevalent sleep issues are in our society. So let's talk a little bit. Okay, actually, this is an interesting point too. So just like the science, I guess, about insomnia, when we're going to sleep, there's two factors that influence how sleepy we are. One is, or how ready we are for sleep, how likely we are to get a restful sleep. One of them is sleepiness, and the other one is noise. So we need to have high sleepiness and low noise. Lack of sleepiness is not usually the issue our society has. It's actually an increase of noise. So this isn't just like necessarily like auditory noise. It could be light. It could be auditory noise. It could be movement. It could be whatever, just any sort of interference that affects our sleep cycles. It occurs in 3 levels: mind, body, environment. So like I was saying, it could really be anything that disrupts our sleep. An interesting one to note is nowadays is, again, the blue light and the background noise. So for example, my husband, he can't even sleep without like a fan on in the background, because his brain is now so used to that background noise for sleep. And this is actually a question I get a lot about white noise or nature noise or gray noise for sleep, because I know he's not alone. A lot of us need it now. We grew up in cities, in just noisier environments. We're not growing up in the countries, away and dead quiet anymore. Is it okay to sleep with white noise? And the answer is we don't actually know. A lot of research says yes, it's fine, it's not doing anything, as your brain will sort of get used to that white noise in the background. It'll just tune it out. So that's one school of thought. Another school of thought says that it is affecting us, and yes, we are sort of tuning it out, but our brains are having to work to tune that out, which is true. And so as we work to tune it out, just that smidgen of effort is taking away from another process. It's just another thing that's using to complicate the brain. And then when we have, when we change and we're in a different environment, our brains have to figure out how to work in the other way. And yes, this can go both ways as well. If we're used to quiet environments and we move into noise, the same thing will happen. But yeah, so that's just the schools of thought. My thought on that is, honestly, do what you need to do to sleep. I think it would be best to do it in quiet and dark and away from white noise if we can. But the reality is, now a lot of us do live in the cities and we are exposed to more noise. And if this is something that helps us sleep, and it's something that's hard to get away from, especially, then do what we need to do. I always tell my patients and people that sleep is probably the most important thing that I will work on with them. If we're not sleeping properly, it's a huge obstacle to cure. It doesn't matter really how well you're eating, doesn't matter what you're moving, what you're doing, what you're thinking. If we're not sleeping well, our bodies can't really run at their optimal health. So it's super important. So let's talk about how to optimize our sleep. So I've been talking about this a lot, but orienting our bodies to this, or orienting our sleep wake cycles to the celestial bodies, so the sun and the moon, the stars, becoming familiar with the patterns of the moon, what it's doing, what stage of the cycle it's in, because we are very much entrained to the lunar cycle as well, and especially hormonally, which I can do another talk on another time. But just being aware of where the moon cycle is, and where the sun is, and where we're getting up with the sun and trying to go to bed with the sun can be really helpful. In the winter, it's not always possible to do that, especially in BC, because it gets dark at like 3 o'clock. So we have to live in the modern age a little bit, but just keeping that in mind, and doing things like blocking the blue light at night. I think most phones nowadays have blue light blockers or blue light glasses, or being really, really conscious of turning off the lamps, the lights outside, using candles, firelights, salt lamps, anything that's softer and will give off that red sort of glow will help the body like recognize that the sun has gone down and it's dark. So spending time outside every day, that will help our brains entrain to the sun cycles, whether or not it's not really a conscious way of knowing, like, oh, hey, it's 12 o'clock, the sun's up there. Our bodies just calibrate and they know. It's an intuitive knowing. It's something we've evolved with. We don't need to consciously tell our brains what time it is. We don't really, we could go into time as a construct, but we as humans have said like 12 o'clock. That's something we made up. Our bodies don't care, but it does recognize that the sun is here, and at this time we might be trying to get ready for sleep. So it's always calibrating with our environment, getting outside and looking at the sun, or just being in the daylight, the rain, maybe the clouds, whatever it is, daylight will help us entrain. And so again, when I say when we travel for jet lag and stuff, one of the most effective ways that we can like get back on the schedule of wherever we are is to go outside and expose our eyes or expose our nervous systems to the morning sunlight, because it will tell our bodies what time it is and how to calibrate there. Ritual, this appeases more of the cognitive side of our creating a routine, reading a book, drinking some tea, putting on a candle, all of the things that we've already chatted about. This will help our brains, our thinking brains, understand that it's time to go to bed. Go to sleep early enough that you wake up naturally. So alarm clocks are not the best way to wake up, because whatever cycle of sleep we're in, it's going to be really jarring and wake us up. If you've ever woken up like really suddenly in a dream, or like you remember your dreams really clearly and you're freaked out, you don't know what's going on, when you wake up by your alarm clock, you're likely in REM sleep. And so that's, when your body's processing and it's doing things and it's very active and it's exploring. If you wake up during REM sleep, your body, it's not a natural sleep. Your body feels uncomfortable. And I think we've probably all had that experience. Sleep paralysis also is a thing. So when your body wakes up in a state that it's not supposed to, such as REM sleep, when the muscles are actually immobilized. So during REM sleep, our dream stage sleep, we go into paralysis. Our bodies paralyze themselves, so we don't act out our dreams. Our brains are off doing exploring and doing whatever. Our bodies are supposed to be resting, so we'll actually we'll paralyze ourselves. Sleepwalking is an issue when that doesn't happen. Sleep paralysis is an issue when we wake up, when some people wake up but they can't move. So if you wake up too suddenly in REM sleep and you can't move, I don't know if that's ever happened. It's happened to me before and it's extremely scary, but that's what's happening. So getting enough sleep, getting to bed early enough so your body can go through those cycles naturally and wake up in a stage that it's supposed to be without that jarring effect of, waking up in REM sleep or waking up somewhere or a deep sleep, even disrupting that complex. This is a really important one. Keeping your bedroom dark and cool. So I was just talking about that. The sound, the white noise. A lot of us now will have and I didn't even think about this until I saw it somewhere, but like blinking blue lights. In my bedroom, it's the air purifier or a night light or your cell phone charger or whatever it is. If you have like a blue light or a green light or anything that's not a red light, even if you can't see it with your eyes closed, your eyelids are thin for a reason. Your brain will pick up on that light and it will affect how you're cycling in your sleep. So keep that in mind. Dark is the best. And then keeping your room cool. Again, I was talking about how your core body temperature needs to drop 2 to 3 degrees to have an optimal sleep. And if a lot of us, we keep our environments pretty warm, and this can't always happen. So being cool is great. I noticed that when my room is cool, I get a much better sleep. A note also, gravity blankets, heavy blankets, weighted blankets can be really amazing for people to help with sleep. I use one personally, and I almost can't sleep without it now, which is its own problem. But and that has to do with having it's more of like a nervous system thing. It's signaling that we're calm, we're protected, we're here, and we're covered. And this is also if we use things like swaddling for babies or those lightning jacket for dogs. It's sort of the same biological mechanism. We're feeling wrapped, we're feeling comforted, and we're feeling protected. So if you struggle with a lot of like anxiety or anxious thoughts and your nervous system is really wound up before bed, gravity blanket can be really good. Avoiding caffeine. This is kind of an obvious one. Pharmaceutical sleep aids, again, can be really helpful, but we actually don't really know what they're doing. We have no idea how it's affecting our nervous system, our sleep cycles. We barely know what our sleep is for in the first place. So pharmaceutical aids can be used safely sometimes, but very carefully, because otherwise we will also get dependent on them. And siestas. So we evolved, this is an interesting one, we evolved taking a midday nap. It's been before 3 p.m. and it's shown that people that do take midday naps, it's kind of like a chance for our brains to do like a quick sweep up, get rid of some of the crap from the day. And they've done studies that show that people learn better after doing siestas. So some countries like Spain, Europe, Italy, Europe's not a country, but in Europe, a lot of the time they'll do siestas, so midday breaks. In Spain, I know, and in Italy, a lot of the time, everything will just close between 2 and 5, and this is siesta time. People are usually, they're going home, they're eating a big lunch, something more heavy than nighttime, and then they'll go take a nap or just rest and relax for a few hours, and then they'll go back to their evening and do whatever. In America, that doesn't happen. We are working all the time and we don't take breaks. We don't rest. This extends to our evenings. This extends to our weekends. This just extends to our life, especially now in COVID times when a lot of us are online. We're starting our own businesses. We're on the computer all the time. It's hard to find that work-life separation. And so we're just not resting, whether that be sleeping or resting in general. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about anything sleep or any topics that I talked about today? You can either just pop on the chat or on camera. It would be lovely to see your faces. Yeah, so sleep, very important. Make sure that it's optimized. Like I said, it's one of the top things that I talk about with my patients all the time. If you're not sleeping, we're not really able to function. We spend 1/3 of our entire lives asleep, more in ancient times. in ancestral times. So in training to that is really going to be key to our health. Well, if nobody has any questions, that's great. I hope you all learned a thing or two about sleep, and you know, why it's so important, how to actually use some of the tools that our natural cycles already go through to work that. So like binaural beats, deep belly breathing. Again, I tell a lot of us to do before bed because it will activate that vagus nerve, put us into parasympathetic mode, which is the nervous system is calm, it's ready to rest, digest, and then tap into that dream state.
That's Kayla. Sorry,
Can't
I
get
have
to
one
sleep
more
early
question.
enough. Oh, hi.
Hi. Could you link the studies that you mentioned about the 8 hours of sleep? I find that really interesting because, yeah, you hear a lot of people say they function well with less than 7 hours. So yeah, the information just feels like it's all over the place there.
Yeah, I know. I didn't explain it that well. I will link all the studies. It's from Dr. Matthew Walker. If you've heard of his book, he wrote a whole book on sleep. He's a PhD sleep guy, and he has it all cited. I will dig them up and I'll send them to you.
Okay,
It's really
thank you.
interesting
I'm sorry,
too.
I meant.
I thought.
Yeah, and I meant the
Sorry?
information's all over the place, not from you, but from like in general. You made
No,
it clear.
yeah,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, I was the same. I was like, I can function fine on 5 hours, but it's not, yeah, it's kind of new to me, but I'll find it. I'm curious more too.
So Kayla, I put a question in the chat. I don't think you saw it though. So I know my body needs 8 hours for sure to be 100%. I can do it on less, but for my own self, I know I need 8 hours. But I get up early because I have to work early, but there is no way that I can get to sleep early enough to give myself 8 hours. I've tried, well, I haven't tried the binaural beats, but I've tried routine and candles and all that kind of stuff. What other suggestions do you have that, you know, I can get myself, I don't know, more tired, I suppose. Like even if I go to bed at a certain time in order to get my 8 hours, I'll just be lying there in bed awake.
Yeah. Are you lying in bed? Is your brain going? Are you thinking? Are you stressed out? Like what's happening when you're just lying there?
Just yeah, you know, the day is going in your brain. Not you know, I wouldn't say stress, but it's just like, okay, I'm lying there, I'm awake, I can't get to sleep. So then, okay, I got this to do tomorrow, I've got that to do next week. Oh, I gotta go grocery shopping. Oh, I forgot to return this. I got blah blah blah, on and on.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing that happens with when we have these big brains is it's not just our physiology telling us to go to sleep. Our brains are also battling us with all the stuff we have to do and didn't do. And it's hard to tell. Sometimes is it like your body just can't go to sleep, or is it because your nervous system is so wound up? Working with someone to sort of target that will be really important, because also like what are your stress levels at? If you're highly wound up and you're hyper producing cortisol, and your nervous system is going to be really elevated, potentially chronically throughout the day, that's going to keep you awake. And then while you're awake and you're kind of feeling that maybe subconscious stress because your body is just flooded with cortisol, your brain is going to tend to think about all the stuff that it has to do because it's feeling stress. This is a problem most of us have. What I tell people to do is, yes, do all the things, do all the physical things, tea, sleep, candles, meditate. But it also is going to have to do with reprogramming our nervous system and sort of our stress response. Binaural beats are really good for that. Like cognitively, like writing, doing a brain dump before bed is really helpful for me. Or if I'm like thinking of all the things I have to do in the morning, even if I'm like half asleep, I'll just write it down on a list. I keep a list beside my bed, and that really helps because you're just bringing it out of your brain and bringing it into the physical. And it seems really simple, but like your cognition will know that it's on the side, and then it can stop worrying about it. You're kind of giving yourself, you're taking away the excuse now for yourself to not think. What else? I don't know if I've talked about like affirmations before, which I might do in one of our Monday calls, but kind of like, I've talked about visualization before. It works really great for sleep. If sleep is a tough issue for you, like visualize yourself sleeping, visualize yourself falling asleep. I know it sounds silly, but it's quite potent. Affirmations. So there's an app called Think Up, which I may have talked about before. I will type it up here. It is basically you just record yourself saying affirmations or sentences, and it like plays back in your brain, or it plays back on your phone, and you can set it for like 20 minutes while you're going to sleep. These are great for any affirmations. I am healthy, I am whatever, but they're really great for sleep. So if you check out the app, I think you can get 3 affirmations that are really good for sleep. So I will fall asleep with ease. I will have a restful, like it sounds really cheesy, I know, but when you continuously like tell yourself that, and the affirmations, this app I really like because your brain is listening to your own voice, which again sucks at first, but it recognizes your voice. Your subconscious knows that, and so you're telling yourself that. Yeah, sleep is one of those things that there's not really an easy answer, and it requires quite a bit of work. We've done ourselves a lot of damage in the modern world to just not focus on that. So I would say continue doing what you're doing and really focus for you, like on the nervous system side of things, your sleep and your cortisol levels. A clue that your cortisol levels may be chronically over elevated is if you wake up really early in the morning, maybe like between 5 and 8, depending on the person. That's the time of day where your cortisol is naturally the highest anyways. But if you're like chronically stressed, you might get a really high spike and wake up with like almost in a panic or an anxiety state. That happened to me for a long time. If you wake up quite hungry, like wake up like, oh, ready to go, really hungry again, this can be a sign that your adrenals may be overtaxed. If you're waking up just like exhausted and you can't even get out of bed, it could be a sign of, again, adrenals, thyroid, iron. So it all depends on the person, but in general, nervous system, I think, for you.
Great, thanks. Good information. I'll download that. Think Up.
Think Up, yeah. Yeah, I know it sounds really weird, but it's a really great tool. Cool. Anybody else? Great. Okay. Well, I hope you learned a thing or two, and I will see you all tomorrow evening for yoga. Have a good day.